Hello, and welcome to Back Through the Lens, where two film school friends talk about movies through the haze of nostalgia, the good, the bad, and the ones that aren't quite how we remember them. I'm your host, Rachel, and with me is my co host, Joe.
What comes to mind when you think of a comfort movie? Is it something you watched over and over and over again? A film where you know every line? Could it be a feel good movie with a happy ending, or perhaps a fantasy adventure in a far off land? Whatever your comfort is, the purpose is the same: escaping the real world for a while with a movie that fills you with the warm and fuzzies. This is our Comfort Watch episode.
So, we're talking about comfort movies today, and I have had such a rough couple of weeks. I was so excited that I got to watch my comfort movie because I felt like I actually needed my comfort movie.
I think I've watched mine a little bit ahead of time. Kind of was bouncing around on our agenda, watching movies when I can, but the feeling is always the same.
Yeah, I had a day where I really didn't know what to do with myself, and I was like, well, I have to, get ready for the podcast anyway. This is
Yeah,
what I would have put on anyway. So
that
worked
works.
out really well. Yeah.
Yeah,
So do you want to get into our first pick?
yeah, we can dive in. We'll do mine first this week. Mine was, well, originally it was just Star Wars generically, and I'll get into that. But I chose Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, directed by George Lucas. It was released May 25th, 1977, rated PG. If you've never seen or heard of Star Wars, we'll crawl out from under that rock. But I will give you my version of a synopsis here. In a galaxy far, far away, but somehow also a long time ago, an evil empire wants to snuff out the last remaining rebel opposers. A tough and resilient princess looks for help in the form of an old hermit, and he gets help from a farm boy. And then they get help from some droids and smugglers. Together, these rebels attempt to save the galaxy from the grip of the Empire. So, I don't know about you, but Comfort Watch it's kind of vague, but it was hard. It's vague and specific at the same time, right? But it was hard to pick a movie because yes, the idea is to be comforted or to put on that pair of familiar pajamas, something that's you don't need to even watch just to know what it is. And sometimes that is kind of based on your mood. Um, for me, a lot of them they're very similar. They're kind of action adventure movies. So at the end of the day, I kind of chose the first thing that popped in my mind after overthinking everything, and that was just Star Wars, just as an entity. It's mostly because now that we are almost 40, we get new Star Wars more frequently than we ever have, and as a fan, that excites me. I know some people might bitch and moan about the prequels or the sequels or the television shows. As a low key fan, I'm not one of those uber fans, and maybe that's why I don't get upset or offended often. But I'm just excited anytime new Star Wars comes out, and whether it's something new I've never watched before or tried and true, put it on, I get lost in this world, and I just it's fun, and everything else kind of melts away for those 30 minutes to 2 hours. But to be specific for the episode, to give you something to watch, we watched the same thing. I picked where it all started from, and I picked A New Hope. So, first time seeing Star Wars, I don't remember the exact when. I know kind of a general area. It was early elementary school. I want to say between first, third grade. But my uncle, my mom's brother, he most of my life has lived in Florida, and he'd come up and visit, obviously, and we were close. And one day, get a package in the mail. My mom opens it and says, "Oh, this must be for you." And it was Star Wars, the original trilogy, 4, 5, and 6, on VHS. And I remember just being enamored with just the look and appeal of it. The old artwork was cool. It clearly was a movie about space. And I don't think I knew much about it at the time, if not anything like very vaguely. Like if I was, let's say, around about 8, it would be 16 years removed from when it was released. I might have known a little bit via pop culture, maybe Muppet Babies or something like that, but I know I was excited to watch them, and I didn't know much about it and never seen them before. And I put in that VHS, and I was gone.
I did not actually see Star Wars until I was in high school.
It's fair.
It was just not on my radar growing up. I was the oldest kid. I didn't have like older brothers who were into Star Wars or anything. It wasn't something me and my girlfriends would have put on. And I feel like we might have a little discussion about the differences in our picks toward the end of this episode. But it wasn't until I really started getting into film and trying to see all these classics, see all these movies that I'd always heard people talk about or that people love for one reason or another, whether, they're legit classics, old Hollywood classics, or just movies that I'd always hear groups of people being obsessed over. So I finally sat down and watched Star Wars, like I said, probably when I was in high school. Um, but it was such a strange experience because there was no way, being a teenager, that I could have just watched it in a vacuum and taken it for what it was, because I already knew all of the characters. I already knew pretty much the main plot points. I mean, I already knew things that are revealed in later movies, just in case anyone has never seen Star Wars. Don't want to give any spoilers, but so watching the first movie for me, it was strange to finally sit and watch something you've heard so much about and you already know so much about. Yeah, it's almost impossible to judge it for what it is, if that makes sense.
So knowing about it to some degree, and that by
Mhm.
that time we were in high school, the prequels have come out already, right?
Yeah, actually, I specifically remember being confused because when I was on this mission to watch all the movies, right? And I was confused because I was like, okay, I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm going to go in release order because that made the most sense to me. And by that time, the prequels had come out and the original Star Wars was now Star Wars 4, A New Hope. And I didn't understand when I was trying to find the movie to rent, whether it was from the library or wherever I was. I didn't understand which one was the original with the original Star Wars movie, because I didn't realize that they had kind of renamed them and renumbered them.
They didn't rename them or renumber them, but before the prequels came out, like the first one that was released was A New Hope. It was just known as Star Wars, as at the time it was just like a one-off. It was just one movie. But it's funny because your high school brain is very similar to my 8-year-old brain. But like when I watched the scroll, I remember seeing like episode 4, New Hope, and I remember like pausing it and asking my mom, like, did he send the right ones? Am I supposed to watch this one first? She's like, I don't know. Let me call your uncle, and he's like, yeah, no, that's the first one. Star Wars is the first one because I'm like VHS just says Star Wars, like where they're she's holding his leg and that classic cover poster. It's like, all right, man, I don't know what I'm missing here, but here we go. And it's
Okay,
just
I
kind of
didn't realize it was already.
yeah, it was
I didn't
already on
realize that
there.
already existed before the prequels. Okay.
Lucas has claimed that he had it all written out and he wanted to do 4, 5, 6 first because he didn't have the technology to do 1, 2, and 3. Which, to get too far down the rabbit hole and not specifically talk about this one movie, but it kind of makes sense because between 3 and the one we're talking about is a giant galactic civil war. So the 70s graphics and technology kind of makes sense post war, I guess. Everyone's in like a depression era. That's kind of how my brain made it make sense.
I think I follow this, but
Yeah.
man, good for George Lucas that this all worked out.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like, what if the
Um,
first one bombed?
I actually I have notes about that later on.
Okay. Okay.
um,
We're getting too far ahead.
yeah. Why is that scroll so cool? I don't know if it's cool now as adults. Now, like we see it at theaters, everyone claps because they just what they expect, and it brings them to that happy nostalgia point. But that first time seeing it, and like a lot of things in this movie, it gives me like wedding video vibes, the swipes, the different tile generators, the scrolling text, but no one's done it before. And then after it leaves the screen, the Imperial warship comes up like right behind it. And I just remember just that beginning and I was hooked in already. Nothing happened. Nothing happened besides words on the screen and then these ships flying by and I was in. That was it.
It's funny that you mention that about the scroll, that it must have been really cool at the time, whereas now we're so used to it. That is the kind of mindset I try to put myself in when watching, I don't want to say older movies because then it makes us sound really old if Star Wars is an old movie, um but I try to put myself in that mindset of how this must have seemed to people who were seeing it when it first came out, how innovative certain things must have seemed, even though certain things to us now are old news or whatever. Yeah, like the scroll. I knew about the scroll before I had seen this movie because I didn't see this movie until what, like the early 2000s. I Star Wars is one of those things that has been parodied and referenced so many times. So to me, I was just like, okay. Like, um, but yeah, you have to try to remember how cool this probably seemed when it first came out, and that they're probably, I assume one of the reasons why it was so popular and then so enduring was that there wasn't anything quite like it at the time.
The visuals are there, but let's not forget to give John Williams all, and we'll give him plenty of flowers, I'm sure, but that this is a Star Wars theme, and it just helps bring you in the magic of just, I don't know how he works. The pairing is so great.
What I always think of when I think of Star Wars is this particular scene from that '70s show where Kelso and Jackie are trying to decide on what to do for date night. Kelso wants to go see Star Wars again. He's already seen it however many times. And Jackie's like, "Well, don't you want to go do something else?" Like, "I don't want to go see Star Wars, blah blah blah." And she's like, "You've already seen it." And he's like, "But it's Star Wars." And she says, "I don't like space, Michael." And this is how I feel a lot of the time. I personally don't like space.
Mm.
I Sci-fi is hard for me to get into. I feel like there's a lot of world building and a lot of different types of characters and species and things I have to keep up with. Um, in all the time since I first saw Star Wars, I've also gained a spouse who is very into Star Wars, who grew up in Star Wars, and he has dumbed this down for me as just like it's good versus evil. At least these first 3 or 4, 5, 6, whatever, dumbed it way down. It's good versus evil, and I was like, "You know what? Okay, I can get behind that." Um, that being said, when I see Star Wars start up with this scroll, I think of Jackie from that '70s show saying, "I don't like space."
I don't like space. And oh, so after we see all the scrolling of text and Imperial warships, we jump right inside the ship. And I remember my little brain just like, what's going on? All this shit's happening. There are people shooting at each other. Darth Vader shows up. Dude's scary, I think. I don't know, he's just big and imposing. And I think maybe I understand what you mean about world building and too much going on, though, because like they don't give you any. You're not like when the pool's cold and you like slowly get into it. This is just diving right in, like just boom.
Yeah.
We're Star Wars. Lucas gave us a little bit of Star Wars history about the Civil War and whatever. Like, oh, okay, but you're reading it, and then it clicks right into the ship, and there's just people dying left and right, being shot by lasers. It's a lot going on.
And there's so many different types of characters already that
Yeah.
I understand you're just supposed to go with it. I guess it is hard for me to not be like, "Well, who's this thing and why is this thing like this and what do all these different types of creatures mean?" And I think that's just like not who I am as a person. That I can't just, like, let it go.
Yeah.
So yeah, he gives you enough information to understand why you're being dropped in the middle of this battle, sure. Um, but I wanted already to know everything about the droids and why are they and what are they, and I don't know.
Could that be an age thing? Because there are movies I've seen as I've been older that may not be to the level of cult fandom and cinematic history as Star Wars. But like I'll watch a sci-fi movie and nothing is explained, and I just go, "That was dumb." But when I'm 7, 8, 9 years old, you can run with it. It's cool. What has anything to do with you waiting to watch it in high school versus me watching it as a child?
I do think you're onto something with it being different because I waited till I was older and I maybe because I was older required more clarification, I guess. However, all the high school boys in that 70s show did not need this clarification. I don't really think
Hmm.
George Lucas was setting out to make a children's movie. I mean, there is something to be said where I think the younger you are, you're just like, yeah, sure. You just go
Yeah,
with it.
suspend disbelief.
Hmm.
Anyway, we get introduced to Princess Leia, who like now and as a child, I just thought just was this cool, mysterious character. Again, everything's being introduced really quickly, and you don't really have time to process. It's eye candy at this point, and we just saw some guy bust through a door and shoot a bunch of people, and now this woman, she don't know she's a princess yet, wearing like a a bed sheet and some buns in her hair, is like secretly talking to droids who like run away. And all you hear her say is the end part with Obi-Wan. And actually, that might be a false memory. Does she even say that at this point? You see it in the movie so many times, you're
I
like,
don't think she does say
yeah, I
it
don't think
yet.
she does. You're just filling in because you know what she says. So my brain, seeing it so many times, filled in the blank. The point is, though, like, now we're starting to develop the plot here, and without giving us anything, even the classic line that I misremembered at this point is you're again wondering what's going on.
I'm glad you also felt that Princess Leia was wearing a bedsheet because I really thought that she had like the most unflattering outfit for a princess. I guess you
Yeah,
don't know she's a princess yet, and she's also like, I don't
just a
know, a working
rebel leader.
princess. Yeah,
Yeah,
she has stuff to do, so I guess we will excuse that. Yeah, no, but like I said before, it's hard for me to watch this in a vacuum. So it's hard for me to see this opening and not be like, "Oh yeah, there's R2D2, there's Princess Leia, whatever." Like it's hard for me to just watch it as a movie. Because I don't know. I like I said, even before I saw this, these characters were everywhere. It's hard for me to also not know everything else that happens in these people's relations to each other that are revealed in later movies.
I didn't think
This has
that.
always bothered me.
Yeah, well, because you saw it when you were older as a kid. I just like you don't see that in I don't want to say modern cinema, but modern cinema at the time, I guess it's not something Scorsese or someone would typically do
Oh yeah.
those kind of transitions, and he did it, and now it's almost like now if someone else does it in a movie that gets released, it's the Star Wars wipe. Like no one was
Yeah.
doing something that anybody could have done. Like I said, it reminded me of like watching a home wedding video, but he did it.
He did do it.
He did do it.
I'm not gonna say it all necessarily holds up, but he did it.
Well, it holds up in the fact that he does it in every movie.
Mm.
But we swipe away, we swipe right, if you will, from we swipe right from the Imperial ship to Tatooine, and we enter our would-be hero. Luke lives on a farm. Luke, farm boy, on a desert planet of Tatooine. What do you farm on a desert planet? Moisture, of course. You farm moisture. How? We don't know. It doesn't get explained. But he, for some reason, wants to be a pilot. He just has it in him that he wants to be a pilot, and he wants to leave his farm. Kind of starting to sound familiar. Huh, orphan teen, not wanting to grow up on this farm. But there's this awesome shot of him kind of like looking hopefully at the sky, and here comes the magic of Jay Willie again. Like Luke's theme is so magical to me. It's like you don't know who this farm guy is because we're just introduced to like 20 characters in like 15 seconds. But he
Yes.
he gazes up at the stars above, and then John Williams' music hits, and he has his own theme, so you know whether you know or not, because I was a kid, but those subconscious cues, you're like, oh, this guy's going somewhere. This is the guy I'm supposed to be paying attention to.
Yeah, and I think you could argue that too, that he's someone to pay attention to because he probably had the most thorough and individual introduction of any character.
Hmm. Yeah,
Now that you mention all this chaos in the beginning.
yeah. There's a bunch of chaos, and then just like Luke on the farm. Um, but this is also a way to start moving the story along because previously, the droids we mentioned, the secret messages R2D2 and C3PO, they abandon ship. They go into like a little escape pod, and the bad guys just let them go because there was no sign of life on this fleeing ship. They crash on Tatooine, and these little creatures called Jawas pick them up, and eventually get sold to Luke as like I guess farm hands, helping hands on this moisture farm.
I guess that's kind of what I thought too.
Yeah. But Luke was tinkering with R2. He accidentally plays part of that secret message that now we actually get to see and hear a bit of. And R2 being the little rebellious droid that he is, he wants to like run away from this new farm to go find Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Lucky for everyone involved that they found the one farm boy who's like, yes, I would like a life of adventure. Also, I know Obi-Wan Kenobi. Let's go.
Well, it's old Ben. They don't know who Obi-Wan is. It's a secret. That's his
I mean, it
that's his
wasn't
government
a
name.
right. It wasn't a really well kept secret considering as soon as Luke sees the recording of Princess Leia saying, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. He's like,
Mhm.
oh, it's probably Ben Kenobi. I bet he knows something.
Yeah, that's weird. Like he basically like took the name Joseph and made Joe, and it's like no one's gonna fucking know.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't
But
know if you had gotten to the part where we discussed the recording yet. I'm sorry.
I think we did.
Sure.
Sure, it's okay.
Okay.
People seen this movie. We're gonna edit all this out.
People have seen this movie. Okay. Continue.
R2 accidentally reveals the video. Luke wants to go find old Ben to ask if he knows anything about this Obi-Wan. Are they related? When Luke mentions old Ben, that maybe he'll know who Obi-Wan is, his aunt and uncle exchange a glance. And even as a kid, I remember going, well, what was that? Why do they look so suspicious all of a sudden? No wonder why Luke wants to run away. I just didn't trust his aunt and uncle for some reason because of that. Even though we find out later it's for his protection, he doesn't know who Obi-Wan is. They tell him no, just go moisture your farm or farm your moisture. And he's like, all right, cool. He forgets about it, and he's like storms off, a little angry teenager because he wants to be a pilot or whatever. But R2, never to listen to anybody but R2, he goes off in the desert to go find Obi-Wan Kenobi. And when Luke finds out, they goes to look after him, and they get attacked by scary sand people. But they get fought off by some old scary guy in a robe, which then you get that awesome, those two awesome lines from Alec Guinness. Hello there. And then he asks him later if he knows who Obi-Wan is, and he's like, "Of course I do. He is me." It's like it's now like an iconic, almost a meme at this point. But it's Alec Guinness just does a really fun job here, being that whimsical hermit. He's really he might have switched his name to Obi-Wan to Old Ben, but he plays Old Ben well.
I like whimsical hermit.
That's what he is. Like he
I
gets
mean,
serious
no, it
later,
fits.
but like
Um,
he has like a bout of like he's just someone's silly grandpa when you first meet
mhm.
him, and later he becomes a serious ninja.
Is he someone's silly grandpa? Because doesn't he save Luke from the sand people? Isn't that his introduction to us?
He like scares them off. There's like a sound, like big. He like
Oh.
makes a big noise, and they're
Oh, that's right.
yeah.
You're
He
right.
doesn't like fight
Also,
them.
that's right. The sand
Yeah.
people creep me out.
Oh yeah, 100%. So after Obi or Ben says that he is Obi-Wan, they go back to his hut. whatever, so wherever he's living in the desert. Here we hear that somehow old Ben knew Luke's father, and he fought in the war with him, the Clone Wars, if you will. Again, as a child, I kind of felt like how Luke is feeling in this scene. You want to know more because it seems like Luke doesn't know anything about his dad, except that maybe he was a pilot, which explains why he wants to be a pilot. Um, and it's kind of in my notes. I wrote something stupid here. It like reminded me, as in my rewatch, not as a child. In my rewatch, it reminded me of Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop. Where he's like, "Who is your daddy? And what does he do?" And Luke's just like saying that to himself. Everyone, it's that moment in the episode where I break Rachel. It's happened already.
I just wasn't expecting a kindergarten cop reference. It's happening already.
Yeah, do it now. Come on. Do the whole episode
The
like that.
funny, the funny thing is that my husband always quotes the part where he says it's not a tumor.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But he does it
Classic.
in the Arnold voice. I'm not going to attempt it because it's not going to work. But a lot of my life is spent hearing certain quotes from Kindergarten Cop,
Mm,
and then you just brought it up again.
you're welcome.
Yeah, in the middle of our Star Wars discussion.
Yeah, well, sometimes you gotta throw a little Arnie in there. Why not?
Yeah, sure.
Um, where do we go from here? So after
Um,
the reveal of Luke's dad, who died in the war, according to Mr. Ben, um, and he shows him his lightsaber and explains that evil is afoot and we must try to stop it. Luke's like, I want to be a pilot and all, but nah, I got chores to do. And they go back to the farm, and the farm is destroyed. So now he's got nothing to go back home to, quite literally, and he kind of is convinced to help old Ben find a ship, and now he's got nothing to live for, so he's going to join the fight.
to live for. Okay, but not only is his farm destroyed, his aunt
Uh-huh.
and uncle were killed.
Oh yeah, so I said
And
he's literally got nothing to go home to. Like he's upset, everything's gone.
but like they literally show the burnt corpses of his aunt and uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, That is so hardcore when you consider the rest of this movie and how silly and kind of comical some of this movie is. They show the burnt corpses of his aunt and uncle, like kind of like trying to get away, as if they were trying to get away. You could see they died this horrible, scary death, and then, we're gonna go to a bar scene with a bunch of like talking lizards. I don't know.
So that's
Or
part of, I think, at least we're supposed to assume part of the reason why he wants to join the rebellion is, in the hut, he's like, oh, I got no dogs in this fight, so to speak. And old Ben's like, all right, it's fair. Can you give me a lift somewhere? And while they're driving him to where he's supposed to go the first time, I can't remember off the top of my head, they see the giant truck the Jawas are in, who sold the droids to Luke and Uncle Owen. They're all slaughtered. That's what red flags him to go home. They're all
Mhm.
slaughtered. So besides that, he has no home anymore. He has no guardians. I would assume he's wanting to join the fight as a little bit of an act of revenge, or at least justice.
No, I appreciate that Luke, I guess, needed a reason to really join this fight and really care about the rebellion, or at least about defeating the bad guys who have now killed his aunt and uncle. Um, it's funny though they don't really reference them anymore after
No.
this, really. He's
Yeah.
he's always talking about that princess needs our help. She's in trouble. Or maybe just that woman. I don't know if he realizes she's a princess. But he's always focused more on needing to help her. He never brings up again, like, oh yeah, and these people killed my only family.
Maybe he wants to help because this is according to what Obi-Wan told him, like the same people that killed his aunt and uncle, so maybe he's trying to save another innocent life.
I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch.
I don't know. Maybe he's got a big old boy crush
I
on
think
her. I
he
don't know.
just really, yeah, I think he just really wants to save the princess,
Yeah.
personally.
But as you alluded to, once all hope is lost, they need to get the ship. And where do they go? Best place to find a pilot? The bar. Hope they have a DD.
Okay, so this whole scene at the bar, like I said before, we meet all different types of creatures and whatever, and we also meet Han Solo, right, at the bar. This entire scene is so goofy, like so many different types of creatures. Han Solo is also obviously the comic relief in all of this and is the more easygoing comical character anyway, especially when compared to how serious Luke is all the time,
Right.
which is something I really noticed rewatching it this time, really how serious and kind of dull Luke is. Um, but no, the juxtaposition of burnt out corpses and then this bar scene plus Han Solo as a, a goofier character, and then the mere existence of something like Jabba the Hutt.
But who doesn't love this scene? Like, it's one of the favorite scenes in the franchise. Like, everyone knows
Mhm.
it. Again, going to the music, the Cantina band. Um, I think Family Guy did a. Oh, yeah, I know Family Guy did a parody, but I think it's in the Family Guy parody. They have the band there and they play their song, and then they get done. All right, what do you want to hear next? And then he's out of the side of the mouth. He's like, play that same song. He's like, all right, same song. Because that's all everyone cares about when they think of this scene.
Mhm.
But there is a little bit of scariness that happens here. There's a bar fight um, that Obi-Wan slices some creature's arm off. Um, Luke, or sorry, Han just straight up shoots a guy,
This
like
is true.
right at the booth. He shot first. I
Mhm.
don't care. I don't care what anyone says. And depending on what version you watch, I didn't see Jabba the Hutt until later on, later in the movies. He was not in this movie in the original release, and they just mention this guy, this Hutt,
This
and
Hutt.
that he owes him money, and that's it. And
Mhm.
that's he kills Greedo to prevent being captured
Mhm.
because he's afraid of Jabba the Hutt. We don't get the scene in the docking bay where he talks to Jabba. That is added when they re-released it when we were in fifth grade.
Noted.
Yeah, that was not. Yeah, I'm just saying. The first time I saw Jabba the Hutt was episode 6.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene was in the version I watched.
Yep.
I watched
Lucas.
it on Disney Plus,
Yep.
FYI.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the digital adding of Jabba because he didn't have
Interesting.
the computer to do that back then. If you watch
He
episode
didn't have
6, it looks a lot different than what he does in the one you just watched.
Okay. I might have to go back and
Yeah, it's
look at these
okay.
in comparison. But he didn't have the technology to make a big blob?
Not the way he wanted to, apparently. I don't know.
Okay.
Listen, this guy, I'm not questioning what he did and why. He just did it, and then he went back and did more, and then he went back and did more.
In some of the scenes where they're supposed to be flying, and like, are you all just shaking yourselves? Like, yeah.
Yeah. It's called
Yeah.
acting, Rachel.
Yeah. It's called acting.
But yeah, we meet Han Solo. And to your point, comic relief versus serious Luke. I think even as a kid, I think I was supposed to maybe like Luke. We're closer in age because he's the young one of the
Mhm.
movie, the would be hero,
Yeah.
and Han is the reluctant hero who clearly just murdered somebody. And I remember going, now that guy is cool. I like this guy. Luke whines too much, but like I feel like that Han is going to eventually come around. Um, and Chewbacca
Mm.
seems like kind of maybe a little bit of a slight moral compass for Han for some reason.
Mhm.
He kind of like forces him to do the right thing, or at least reminds him to do the right thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Um, what is the controversy about whether Han shot first? Is it because it makes him a bad guy if he See,
Yeah,
I thought that was
yeah,
just who he was. Like, why would he wanna get caught?
exactly. So the whole thing is Lucas, in one of his many re-edits, went in there to have he slowed it down to make it look like Greedo shot first, and it was in self-defense. But either way, Han's still shooting him under the table.
Yeah.
Very like Wild Wild West, which let's see another comparison with Star Wars. It's like
Oh,
fantasy
of
in
course,
space,
yeah.
Wild Wild West.
I definitely caught the Western influences
Oh
for
yeah,
sure. And I mean,
but
just look at the character of Han Solo.
yeah, or
So,
the entire planet of Tatooine.
sure, yes.
Yeah,
Um, no, I really didn't think it made him less of a hero or good guy. He's a I don't know, he's like a pirate. He's out for himself, like,
yeah,
just like who he is.
yeah,
And in the end, you start to see some changes in him, like any good character arc. I mean, he's obviously only in it for like the payday or whatever, as we see a little further down the line where he kind of ditches everybody.
yeah.
So,
I Pirate's good though. Like I feel like the Millennium Falcon is like his pirate ship. He literally smuggles
mhm.
things for money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So why wouldn't
he's
he
yeah he's
shoot the
making a
messenger that was
payday.
sent by Jabba the Hutt?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
He
no,
doesn't want to get caught. If he gets caught, no more job.
yeah. I'm with you here. He shot first, but who cares? Is where I am with this.
George does.
That George Lucas has some questionable decision making, is what I'm
Yeah,
learning here. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. It's a love hate thing.
Mhm. So I
Um,
hear.
but back on the Death Star.
Mhm.
Um, we're gonna just summarize it here. There's like a team meeting, and Vader gets kind of mad and gets into a fight with a coworker. And this is where you start to see kind of the power of the Force through Vader, and he's like
Mhm.
strangling a man from half of conference table away or whatever. And it's
Mhm.
like scary, but it's cool because you don't see anything like this before. And
Yeah.
then like this dude's like, "Hey, stop it, Vader!" And Vader just stops. And it's it's weird to me because like Vader's supposed to be this badass. We don't really see it until like modern movies.
Yes.
But he's getting
Mhm.
yelled at by his like I don't know floor manager not to strangle out his coworker, and that's this is me thinking about in the rewatch. Obviously, as a kid, it was like, oh my god, he's choking him with his brain. That's so cool. But now
Mhm.
it's like kind of funny. He's doing that during like a conference call or whatever, and then his boss yells at him, and he stops and literally like storms away.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I that struck me actually the first time I ever watched it because I just assumed he was the big bad and he was I don't know, like an emperor almost who had, who had taken over and everyone listened to him.
yeah,
So I always found that so confusing because I had thought his character was the type that he would just get rid of anyone who wasn't agreeing with him. And he is, like I said, he's the big bad.
yeah. Like I in my head, he would have just choked out the other guy, and would be like, anyone else
Mhm.
want to oppose me?
Right.
Right.
No, exactly.
But he storms off.
Hmm.
He's got a
He has
little
to go
anger
sulk.
problem.
Hmm.
Oh, he does a lot of sulking.
Hmm.
But they have captured since we last got swiped from the scene. They have captured Leia, and they are trying to like break her through some sort of space torture and the Force mind trick to reveal where the rebels are hiding. And I'm gonna say this: Leia's a badass bitch, and she's strong, and they ain't getting anything from her. The only time she bends is when they threaten to blow up her entire planet because they are now on the Death Star, which is basically a planet destroying tank, space tank,
Hmm. Hmm.
essentially. If you've never seen it, I think it's the best way to describe it. And so, with a promise that we all know is going to be broken,
Hmm.
she tells them where the space station, the rebel space, are hiding, and they blow up all the run anyway. Boom, gone. Pure evil. So, after he gets scolded by his boss, he blows up a planet like a child. So, with everyone aboard the Millennium Falcon, they, through hyperspace, go travel to however far Alderaan is. And when they come out of hyperspace, there's no planet there because we just saw they all got bloated up. Um, we had a cool moment on the Falcon when that happens with Obi-Wan, just like looks like he got physically punched in the gut, and he's like, "Oh, I hear like millions of voices, just hushed or
Mhm.
all at once or something like that."
Mhm.
Um, which is it shows his level of the Force, which we're gonna get into later because it kind of in this first movie gets a little confusing how powerful either Obi-Wan or Vader are because he can
Mhm.
sense that, but they can't
Mhm.
sense each other. And Vader can't sense he has kids. Whoop, I said it. Sorry, that's the second one. Um, but while they're floating in the dust of this former planet, they're gonna try to go land on a moon, and we get another stupid line that I love so much that all fans love. That's no moon, and in fact, it is not a moon. It is the Death Star, and they get sucked into their basically the tractor beam, which is like their orbital pull, and now they are on the Death Star.
A little bit ahead of you, but Obi-Wan Kenobi just pieces out really fast.
Oh hell yeah,
Like once they are on board the Death Star.
yeah. And if I can remember the first time watching it, I didn't think anything of it. It's just like he's clearly a team leader, and he's got to go do what he's got to do.
Mhm.
Watching it again, it kind of makes sense because while he's doing that, everyone else is just being really bad at doing. I think he just said stay put, and they're like causing all this commotion. But
Yeah.
maybe he meant for that to happen. Maybe he knew these newly recruited rebel army would
Mhm.
be so
Mhm.
bad at taking orders from an old hermit that they would cause chaos so he can go sneak around and do what he's got to do.
Yeah, maybe because it was funny to me that Obi-Wan's the only one who knows what he's doing
Mm-hmm.
or has any, you know, knowledge of these people they're up against or whatever. And he's just like, all right, bye, and leaves
Mm-hmm.
them to fend for themselves. And I understand, you know, as the movie progresses, like I understand he's going after Darth Vader, but like when he first left, I was like, all right, that's a choice, sir.
Yeah, bold choice.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Han and Luke they jump some guards a la Looney Tunes and take their outfit, and R2 patches into the Death Star as one does, and they find out Leia's there, and of course, not so cool hand Luke gets all anxious to go save Leia, and Han, he's kind of reasonable actually. Like he looks like an anti-hero or reluctant hero, whatever you want to call him, but he's just being smart. He's like, yeah, all right, kid, cool. Like this place is crawling with evil empire. You want to just try to find a needle in the haystack, and that's
Hmm.
when the money. Like Han in this first movie is driven by money, probably to pay off Jabba, or who knows, escape this galaxy full of the empire. But he gets coerced into doing it with the false promise of potential princess
Hmm.
money.
But yeah, exactly. So we don't have to pretend that Han is a great hero.
Hmm.
He's also allowed to have a character arc and become a hero. It's
Yeah,
fine.
which makes him a better character.
Calm down, George Lucas. It's fine.
um, so they, while Obi's sneaking around, they go to go save Leia because of the money or whatever. Um, keeping the
So funny.
droids in the closet. They get this great idea to like pretend like they're taking Chewbacca to jail. And they go to like the corridor where all the jail cells are, and they take over. And it's like I don't know, Han is you're right. Han is the funny person in this movie because when someone calls down to the office, like, "Oh, what's going on? We heard a scuffle," and he's like, "Nope, everything's cool. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?" He's like, "What? We're coming down there anyways." And he shoots the damn thing. He's like, "I didn't like that conversation anyway." It's just a random moment we didn't need, but I'm glad we have. It's so silly, but also feels kind of realistic because it's they just shot a bunch of people and someone had to have heard that.
Mhm.
Like if
Yeah.
they were to do it, if we know the heroes aren't going to just go waltz in there, kill 3 or 4 guards, and save Leah.
Yeah.
Also, I love the line, "I thought you'd be taller for a stormtrooper."
I miss that.
Yeah, when Luke goes in there and he takes off his helmet, it's like, "Oh, okay, you're not a stormtrooper."
Mhm.
Um, so they get pinned down in this hallway after Han is not good at lying that they were fine. And here's like
Mhm.
where Princess Leia is just a badass. She
Mhm.
steals the blaster, shoots a hole in the side of the hallway, and just jumps in.
Yep. I like that part. I just like that she got tired of waiting and took care of shit herself.
Yeah, she's been waiting, and she's finally has like an inch of freedom. She wasn't gonna let it go,
Mhm.
which is understandable.
Yep.
Um, the hole they jump into is a garbage chute, and I remember as a kid thinking this was hilarious. Um, even when like you think they're gonna die, like
Yeah.
when there's the monster, and then they page 3PO and they try to like drain it or whatever the hell they're trying to do, but then like they start crushing the walls in.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I knew they weren't gonna die, I guess, because it's only halfway through the film, but I just thought it was really funny. It just seemed like this little silly escape that went
Mhm.
awry.
Yeah, that went horribly wrong. I especially on this rewatch thought it was so funny. C C3PO's reaction was so funny to me when he unknowingly stops the walls from coming in and crushing them. He hears them cheering and he thinks they're all like screaming and dying, and he's convinced himself that he's killed them all.
Yeah.
Um, I like the arc of C3PO and R2D2 both. They kind of develop this relationship like where
Hmm.
they especially C3PO starts to really look out for R2 more and actually care about him, and then also they start caring for the people too.
Yeah. A little bromance there. It's fine.
Yeah.
Eventually, during all this chaos, Obi-Wan does shut down the tractor beam so they can escape.
Mhm.
And he's just like this old ninja. He went from like a whimsical hermit to a sneaky ninja. Um, which, by the way,
Mhm.
also Vader's clearly a samurai, yes, or designed to be one.
I'm
Like,
pretty sure that Lucas took some inspiration from Kurosawa films for Star Wars,
yeah, I think
so
so.
that would make sense.
Yeah. Um, and he somehow gets back to the ship when they're getting back to the ship. I passed over a lot of them running around and shooting at things and escaping other
Yes.
stormtroopers, but that's fine. Um, it's exactly what I said it was. It's great. I do. I guess I like the part when like they awkwardly swing over this gap, and that's when I noticed like Luke has like a really poor man's Batman utility belt. I guess.
Yeah. That
Um,
part that when they're on the not connected ends of the bridge, I got
mhm.
like vertigo watching that. I was so tense, and it's like I could feel how high up they were and what a teeny little platform they were on. I don't it affected me.
Well, good, good.
Well, good. Yeah.
Yeah. But they make it. They grapple across. They get to the ship, but at the same time, Obi Wan does, and I feel like it's obviously somehow by design. You can tell how Elginus is like doing his eyes and facial expression. He seems rather glad that he's about to like fight Vader in front of them and then
Mhm,
die.
mhm.
And
But
I
I
think he
understand what you're
just
saying. There was something going on in his facial expressions that he was trying something was attempting to be communicated that I wasn't exactly picking up on.
yeah, and I feel like it's if he didn't, as in Luke, he isn't Luke. If Luke didn't have enough to kind of fight for with his entire farm and family being burnt, this new father-like or grandpa-like figure is about to be murdered in front of him, and I don't know. It's just this another layer to Luke's kind of justice story, I guess, even though he just met him yesterday.
Right.
Yeah.
I really didn't understand at the time if Obi-Wan had died or if he had simply teleported away at the last minute.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. It was a kid. I had no idea what the hell happened because this is the first time you see a lightsaber fight, which that is a generous term for the lightsaber battle that we see here.
The fight choreography really left something to be desired here.
Yeah.
The
They.
twirl, the slow twirl that Obi-Wan does at the beginning of the fight, I he left himself wide open just to do a twirl.
A pirouette.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right ballerina term. I don't know. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, I thought like you just did he disappear? What happened? Is this what happens when you get hit with a lightsaber? You just disintegrate, which
Yeah.
we it's not true because we saw Obi cut off a monster's arm at the bar. So you know it's just like
Well,
a laser sword thing.
right. And also, if I'm remembering correctly, Obi-Wan sort of gives a look to Luke right before he disappears or gets killed. And so
Yeah.
I really wasn't understanding if he was giving that look to be like, don't worry, I got this. Or was he letting himself get killed? I don't know.
Yes. The answer is yes to both of those.
Okay.
He did in fact have this because he was going to let himself get killed. That's part of his plan. Um, I guess I don't know. I think he could have been useful still as a live Jedi Master,
Right.
but
Right.
I'm also assuming this is helping them get away because he's fighting Darth, who is I don't know. Again, the powers of the Force in this first movie wane. Like he can choke somebody out, and later on you can see
Mhm.
him.
Mhm.
You can stop blasters with it and throw things and people. I'm sure that he's probably power enough to like literally stop the Millennium Falcon from taking off. But
Mhm.
instead of doing that, instead of stopping any of them from leaving, he's just like towing the robe that when Obi-Wan disappeared, like also just
Yep.
surprises the rest of us.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, Vader is not very scary in this movie as he's supposed to be, but maybe in 77 he was. I don't know. But this is not the end. We
Oh,
go to the
it's
rebel
not.
base. We devise a plan of attack. Apparently, there is a hole that is the blow up button. The in case emergency, shoot here and it will blow up the Death
Right.
Star. It's funny because they're going over this plan and they're kind of applauding each other and bringing their own courage up because they're trying to attack the Death Star and the evil Empire. And Luke just seems so disinterested, but also interested at the same time. He's like, "Oh, I want to help out, but it's just kind of boring." Like he just seems—I don't know if he's mourning the loss of like everyone he knows, including his new friend Old Ben.
Yeah, my note says sad Luke back on the ship. But yeah, this is where I sort of solidified my Luke is kind of a wet blanket and Han Solo is a lot more fun
Yeah,
thesis of Star Wars. But like also I understand Luke's had a kind of a bad run,
yeah.
so I get it.
He needs a comfort movie watch right now.
There you go.
That was meta. That's great.
Yep.
Yeah, but Han leaves. He's like, I'm done. I got you to the princess. I got princess safe. I did what I said I was going to do. Fuck you, pay me. Bye.
Yes.
He's got slug pirates to pay off. Um, so they go into space and they battle. Han ends up coming right back. He pulls a Yui and he's helping in the fight, and everyone's happy. Then, with the help of Obi's Force Ghost in his head, Luke makes the shot that he needs to make and blows up the Death Star. Except for Darth Vader wasn't on the Death Star because he was busy trying to kill everybody with his TIE fighter. So that was,
Hmm.
you know, lucky us.
Yep.
Yeah. And that is mostly Star Wars in a quick little rundown. Sorry for all the fanboys and girls that are going to be mad at me for not giving it every line of credit it needs to have. I had fun.
I had fun too. I I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but I still enjoy especially the first movie. So,
I also love the very end. The awards ceremony, I guess you want to call it. Leia's all dialed up.
yeah,
Luke has on this fancy jacket. He no longer looks like he's from a farm.
right.
Han Solo looks exactly the same, only he buttoned his top buttons.
Yeah.
Like he's like, oh, hold on. All right, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Um,
But I feel like that fits.
it fits. Yeah, it's on
Yeah.
brand. And in my notes, I have Leia's lip gloss is rocking. Reminds me of Dorothy's slippers.
Nice.
Want to go back to your point about what happens if this flopped?
Okay.
Because I actually have here. Could this have worked as a standalone movie? If it wasn't successful and George never got the green light to do 5 and 6, could this have worked?
Hmm.
He starts with 4. He claims that was his plan the whole time. When we get the opening credits, the opening scroll, we give a little bit of a backstory of this galactic war. Great. We get a happy ending. The Death Star blows up. We do see Vader kind of like spin out of control and fly away somewhere. We
Hmm.
see all our new space friends together at the end. I would argue if they never made another one, I think you would just assume that they won the war. Like it could, I guess, be a standalone film. The way he ended
Yeah.
it, like it wasn't like a cliffhanger exactly,
Hmm.
but it could have been like, yeah, they blew up the space station. Vader spun out of control. He's who knows, floating in space somewhere. Everybody's
Hmm.
happy.
I could see that. If it was a standalone, you would just think they won. One thing I did notice, and I don't know if it's the version I watched or what, but on Disney Plus at least, it looked like sometimes it looked like the characters' mouths sometimes were not matching what they were saying. Like maybe they had to go in and
Ooh,
dub
maybe.
more so for like peripheral characters, not our main characters. But that's
I
something I noticed a lot where I felt like I could tell that this was a dubbed line.
I didn't
So,
notice that. No, I have to
okay.
go back now and pay attention to like the not important characters, and because they might have dubbed it over time.
Well, and I'm sure that has to happen from time to time with anything, but it just
Yeah,
seemed really obvious for some of the people. But I think that's all I had on Star Wars.
yeah. How do you feel about Spaceballs?
I like Spaceballs. I haven't seen it in a while.
Same. I feel
Yeah.
like you have to at least on a surface level appreciate one to appreciate the other.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Or maybe you can hate Star Wars and that's why you love Spaceballs because it's a parody. It's making fun of
Well,
it. But I
you
think
would have to at least be familiar with Star Wars to
to enjoy the
appreciate.
jokes, yeah.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. We'll come back with my pick. All right, we're back with my pick for a comfort watch. My pick is You've Got Mail, directed by Nora Ephron, released December 18th, 1998, rated PG, and it is based on the 1940 Ernst Lubitsch film, The Shop Around the Corner. So, just in case you haven't seen You've Got Mail, which I don't think Joe did before we did this episode, Kathleen Kelly owns a children's bookstore in New York City. Joe Fox is part of a business dynasty that opens large discount stores, threatening to run the little guys out of town. It's a classic enemies to lovers rom com with the also classic pairing of Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. So, the first time I saw You've Got Mail, I know I saw this in the theaters with my friends. I was in middle school in 1998, and we would literally go to the theater every weekend, seeing whatever new teen movie was out or new rom-com. I would say we were probably not the exact target audience for You've Got Mail because it's not a it's more of a grown-up rom-com, I would say. But still, this was very much something. that we would spend our time and money to go see. There was just a steady stream of these coming out at the time, and I personally feel like, at least now, decades later, You've Got Mail really stands out from the pack of rom-coms and comedies that were coming out at the time. Um, but I still watch it a few times a year, especially in the fall.
So yes, Rachel, this is probably my first time looking at this movie. Um,
Looking at this movie.
I might have seen bits and pieces when I was younger. I think my mom or grandmother might have rented it, and I just wasn't paying attention or just was out playing instead. Some of the scenes look familiar, but maybe also because it's Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, so who knows? Plus commercials, trailers. But as an official viewing, this is my first
Mhm.
watch.
Well, welcome, Joe.
Also, if we want to break it down, could this be another good versus evil movie?
Maybe. But if we're talking about this in the lens of a comfort watch, I don't like to think about that, but we will get into it.
Oh, okay. Is it bad that my comfort watch was good versus evil? Is that what does that say about me?
I think I would be concerned if your comfort watch was where evil triumphed over the good people. I think maybe that we'd have to have a talk.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, you're
Carry
you're
on.
good. Carry on. So the opening credits to this movie are so nostalgic because, I mean, first of all, the song that is playing, immediately this opening brings me back to like I said, being a teenager. When I first saw this movie, it makes me think of just being younger, having little to no responsibilities, and going to the movies every weekend. But also, You've Got Mail specifically features the dial up internet tone during the opening credits, which is just something that doesn't exist anymore. And that specific dial up internet tone is very much like a sound of my teenage years.
Yeah, I being my first experience, I was like, "Whoa, it feels the beginning feels dated. The rest of the movie does not. I'll say
Mhm.
that right now. I actually did enjoy the movie, but the beginning part, I was like, "What are we getting into?" I literally have in my notes, "Oh my, the dial-up slash Y2K vibes slash Sims graphics." I don't know if
Yeah.
we have any young people out there listening to our episodes, but all that was a thing. I mean, just Google search what a dial-up tone is, or maybe Rachel could give an example here.
Yeah, I'm
Is
not
there?
doing that.
Damn.
Were you expecting something like super cheesy and dated based on the graphics in the opening?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
I
guess
could see that.
I shouldn't have been too surprised because it is called "You've Got Mail," which is another infamous soundbite from our childhood.
Right. An also dated
Hmm.
reference from our childhood. Yeah.
Yeah, kids out there, imagine anytime you got a text message or TikTok notification, it said "You've got mail" audibly.
Oh, wow, that's such a good point. I honestly have this problem when I'm watching slightly older shows or older movies or just things that take place before cell phones where I'm like, "Oh my god, why don't they just like call someone for help?" And then you realize they can't. Like even what was I watching recently? The Stephen King movie that I was telling you I was watching, where she kidnaps the writer. Oh,
Misery.
Misery. Yeah. I was watching Misery and I was like, why didn't this poor man just call for help? He can't because cell phones weren't a thing. Like the whole movie, I had to catch myself during the whole movie just being like, why doesn't he call for help? He can't.
Listen, I don't want to
Um,
get too far down the rabbit hole of Misery, but he is held hostage. So if he had a cell phone, she probably would have taken it from him.
no, I get it. But just
Yeah.
I don't wanna, spoil misery for anyone, but at various points during the movie, I was like, "Why doesn't this particular
Yeah.
character call for help or call for backup?" So this is just a giant blind spot I have now where I think cell phones are always available, I guess. Anyway. So we open with Kathleen Kelly, played by Meg Ryan, and her boyfriend Frank is at her apartment. I, to this day, don't really know if they live together or he's just there all the time. But Frank is complaining about technology consuming people.
Mm.
which I appreciate in terms of this movie that is about kind of the beginning of people starting to use the internet for like personal purposes and using it in just their regular homes and their everyday life. But also hearing someone complain about people not paying attention anymore and technology consuming people. Um, some things just never change.
Yeah, he hit that right on the button.
Hmm.
How consumed we are.
Yep. And little does he know that his girlfriend is so consumed by technology that he isn't going to have her around pretty soon.
Yeah.
There's this really famous quote from the movie where we see Kathleen and Joe sending their first email of the movie to each other. And you hear what they're writing in voiceover. And Joe, Tom Hanks, says, "Don't you love New York in the fall? It makes me want to buy school supplies. I would send you a bouquet of newly sharpened pencils." As someone who is incredibly basic, loves fall, always loved shopping for school supplies in the fall, also loves New York City despite not living there or really having any connection to it at all. This is like one of my favorite parts of the movie. Just the montage of fall in New York and this line of bouquet of newly sharpened pencils.
Yeah, I thought of my wife because for some reason she also likes school supplies. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't I don't mind a nice fresh pen and notebook myself. A thing. Why is New York specific like fall specifically in New York? Like we have fall in other big cities. I don't know.
I think there's just a romanticism with New York.
Yeah, but why like fall in New York? That's the part I couldn't like. It's being romanticized here, and I'm sure like any
Well, they
season,
both live in New York and they
right?
love it.
Yeah, but like I feel like fall in Northeast Ohio is cool because we have lots of parks with trees to see the actual fall happen. The colors.
They have
I don't know.
Central Park.
They have one park.
No. Jeez. Okay. Joe's over here repping for the Rust Belt.
Listen, I like my trees.
No, I get it. They have trees in New York. Okay, anyway, moving on. Everything I just mentioned about this one little scene is why this is a comfort movie for me. Also, you're ruining it. Jesus. Okay. So we are introduced also to Joe Fox, played by Tom Hanks, and his girlfriend, Patricia, uh, played by Parker Posey, which is a welcome addition to, I don't know, a bigger budget movie. I don't feel like this is what you would normally see her in. But I love Patricia, even though I know she's like very annoying. And I think maybe it's just how Parker Posey plays her. But um, I love this introduction of her character where she's just rushing around trying to get ready for work and not even just rushing around. She's like flailing her limbs really dramatically and like begging the coffee maker to get going and work faster. And I love the line where she asks Joe, as Joe calmly sits down to like write an email or whatever he's doing, if he pressed the button to start the coffee maker. And he says, "Yes, I pressed it." And you could just tell from this line, this delivery of this line, that like this is not the relationship for him. Like we're
Mm,
already setting the stage for both of these couples to not be together by the end of this movie. Like these are not the people they're meant to be with. And this leads me into something that I don't know what to call other than the boyfriend issue in rom-coms. There
yeah.
seems to always be it could be either a boyfriend or a girlfriend, to be fair, but it seems like it's usually, and I preface this by saying I'm talking about rom-coms where there's a heterosexual couple. There is usually a boyfriend in the way of our couple getting together. But the movie usually goes to sometimes great lengths to show us why this boyfriend is not a good match for the girl in the movie. And I didn't honestly pick up on this that much until my husband pointed out that supposedly every rom-com we watch is very mean to the current boyfriend. So he kind of almost got me started on this. I'm sort of looking out for this specifically. Where do we start to see the cracks? And I actually feel like You've Got Mail, as we move through it, it does more work to show why their current relationships are not right than maybe some other rom-coms do. Uh, I believe I was watching Sleepless in Seattle with my husband, and Meg Ryan's boyfriend in the movie has, like, seasonal allergies and sneezes a lot, and you're supposed to take that as him being kinda dopey and, like, she could have someone better who is Tom Hanks, and my husband was so angry because he's like, "This poor man can't help his allergies." So ever since then, this is, something that has been brought to my attention, and I look out for it.
I have always noticed this. Maybe that's why I don't get pulled to rom-coms. I think I've noticed it like preteen, teenage years, kind of being the quiet introvert I was at the time. You see these movies, and yes, they're like finding something wrong with the boyfriend to be broken up with. You're like, but
Mhm.
why? But but why? All the time. This time it's like we're doubled down though, right? Because there's two relationships we have to
Mhm.
eventually tear down and bring another one together.
Mhm. And
Um,
I do think it's sort of funny that for a setup like this for You've Got Mail, you already have such a hurdle in terms of how Kathleen and Joe's relationship starts with them being business rivals and,
mhm.
the whole enemies to lovers thing. You would have, in my opinion, you would have had plenty of stuff to get over
Right.
without each of them being in a relationship, but it probably helps them both to have someone else to play off of throughout the movie.
Yeah, I would say so. And then also their bad characteristics will foil what they see good in the other person.
Mhm.
I also wanted to point out, I just realized this when you were talking about that line of pressing the coffee button. I
Yeah,
do love how he delivered that line. Yes, he pressed the coffee button, and it's almost like she is pressing his buttons because he seems very annoyed with her.
that's great. I like it. In addition to that line I love about the school supplies, we go into a montage of Kathleen and Joe walking separately through New York City, but sort of crossing paths while the Cranberries play. And like this montage alone is comfort movie for me. And I've seen it pop up on the internet a lot now too during fall. Just, um, I said pop up on the internet like an old person. But I meant more so like on Instagram. Uh, that this is kind of looked at as a fall movie, even though it takes place, I would say, over the course of almost a year because it's spring when we end the movie. But
Yeah.
I don't know if there are a lot of movies that they make fall such a focus, at least for this beginning part. And I don't care what you think. This movie makes me love New York. I have a romanticized version of New York in my head, obviously romanticized because these people live on the Upper West Side, and
Yeah.
that is one very small piece of New York.
Yes.
um,
That's the part with the trees.
yeah, there you go, the part with the trees. So we see that Kathleen owns a bookstore, a children's bookstore called Shop Around the Corner, which is a reference to the movie The Shop Around the Corner, which this movie is based off of. Just as a big film nerd and also a big Jimmy Stewart fan, I it's another reason why I really appreciate this movie. We see Kathleen talking to one of her coworkers about this is where she kind of admits that she has this guy she talks to online. What I love about this scene though is that when she first starts talking, her coworker says, "Are you online?" And it just talk about dated. like
Yeah.
because yes,
It's
there was a time where like I remember it being such a big deal when we got internet in our house.
yeah. Well,
And
then you get your own email, and then eventually
mhm,
there was AOL Instant Messenger, aka AIM, and then
mhm.
that evolved to, "Are you on AIM? What's your AIM name?" But the point is, like, it didn't go away. It just changed a little bit.
That's true. I think it's just funny to me that I don't think of this as a old movie, quote unquote, but so many things in this movie are such a novelty that are so standard now that it really is hard not to feel like this is just another time. We meet another of Kathleen's employees, George, when he is asked if he's online. George says the internet is just another place to be rejected by women. And watching this from a, you know, 2025 lens, um, I can't help thinking that maybe George is an incel, maybe.
Maybe, or he's just a sad '90s man. I don't know if that was a term they even threw around back then. I don't
Right.
know.
Not s- I do think he is also a just a sad sack, but it's hard not to see these things in certain ways given our current state.
I get it.
So we've established that Kathleen works at this little indie bookshop that was left to her by her mother. We now see that Joe Fox works in the family business, which is these big discount bookstores, very similar to some real life big discount bookstores that maybe we shouldn't name.
Can we
um,
mention the ones that don't exist anymore?
sure.
Because they reminded me because of the time Walden Books. I would buy books there all the time. Goose
Yeah.
my Goosebumps books.
And
Yeah,
Borders,
Borders. Yep.
that kind of a thing. Yep.
Yeah.
So really big bookstores that could sell books for cheaper than an indie and also have cafes. Yeah. Which is ironic because now those are the physical bookstores. But anyway, so Joe's part of this family business. His dad and his grandpa are both still in the business, and they're all celebrating different indies going under as they plan to open a new location in the Upper West Side, really close to Kathleen's shop. They mention that the shop around the corner is one of the last holdouts, and Joe's grandfather mentions that he was pen pals briefly with Kathleen Kelly's mom and maybe had a date with her, I believe. But I really like this callback to being actual pen pals with physical letters because that
Yeah.
is the plot of the movie, The Shop Around the Corner. Jimmy Stewart has a pen pal that, unbeknownst to him, is someone he doesn't get along with at work, like you do. Um, it's a very sweet movie. Please go watch it if you haven't. Like I said, I'm a sucker for Jimmy Stewart, and I really like Ernst Lubitsch and his Eastern European romances.
How does one get a pen pal that they don't know who they are? Like if I were to start writing
Um,
you letters, like I know where to send it. Like we could
There
communicate that
used
way.
to be, yeah, that's true. I believe in the movie The Shop Around the Corner, they had like PO boxes or something that it wasn't their
Hmm.
actual address. I can't remember exactly, and I can't remember how they started writing each other.
Okay.
For anyone who has not seen You've Got Mail, Kathleen and Joe apparently start talking in a chat room and then only exchange email addresses and nothing else, which also
Do we
the
have to explain what
concept
a
of
chat room is?
I don't know, I was just going to say the concept of chat rooms alone is pretty old. We've established that Joe Fox is definitely out to put Kathleen Kelly out of business, and my little rom-com heart wants them to end up together so badly, but also struggles with this aspect of the movie, which we will discuss as we go through this.
Okay. The whole time I kind of felt like he was not as evil, so to speak, as his father and grandfather.
I also got the sense, rewatching it for this episode, that he is not quite as cutthroat as he acts around other people
Hmm.
that are in his business, which again, we will get into.
Yeah. That could just be
Um,
me liking Tom Hanks. Like he's adorable and lovable. Maybe I'm just being biased.
well, yeah, I honestly I think that is part of it because who doesn't love Tom Hanks? And especially, as I said, as the movie goes on, he's like very charming, and it's hard to see him as the bad guy, which I'm sure they were banking on, to be fair. So we see some montages of Joe and Kathleen writing to each other. She encourages him at one point to read Pride and Prejudice, and he very obviously hates Pride and Prejudice. And I just would like to personally take umbrage with that because it is such a stereotype for men to not like Pride and Prejudice specifically, but also men are allowed to read books that were written by women. It's going to be fine. Much like you are able to watch rom coms.
Yes, I said I enjoyed this film. I can't
Yep.
say the same about Pride and Prejudice.
Okay.
But I
Well,
I do need to do a reread on that. I didn't think I liked any books from that age. Like specifically that, can't remember
mhm.
what
Like the
year of
Regency era kind of
well,
a
just the
thing?
ones that were forced on me in that year of school.
Oh,
Like
I
there was
see,
it
yeah.
just like kept piling up, and it, like I liked
Yeah.
a couple of them, and then the ones I liked, no one liked. Like I might have been the weird kid in the back of the class that liked Catcher in the Rye, and everyone else
Oh,
was
I
talking
like
about.
Catcher in the Rye, and everyone
Okay,
hated it. I will give you a pass if you were forced to read it for school because that's a whole different
yeah, it
issue, I think. I don't know if
was that and Wuthering Heights, like back to back.
oh, I like Wuthering Heights a lot. I'm like the only person I know who enjoyed Wuthering Heights. I am impressed that you had to read Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights for high school.
Yeah,
We did not.
Gatsby, 1984, Catcher in the Rye.
Okay, back to You've Got Mail.
I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, who knows? We have a little scene where Joe is talking in one of his emails about ordering at Starbucks, making people feel like they really know about coffee. And it made me wonder if this was sort of when Starbucks was first starting to get popular. I honestly can't remember when
I feel like it
Starbucks was
already
really becoming
was
a thing,
popular though.
but it wasn't like pumpkin spice latte popular, right?
Well, probably not, no, but I feel like it was already by the late 90s a joke upon itself to just be the epitome of big business. Like I think there was
Okay.
a reference in Simpsons or Futurama or something I would watch on TV where like, oh, they just built a new Starbucks across from the other Starbucks.
Yeah.
Like it was already kind of this thing being perpetuated in pop culture.
Yeah. That's how it actually is by my parents. There's like a Starbucks like a block away from a Starbucks.
Yeah.
But anyway, the man who was ordering the Starbucks in the movie, his coffee only costs 2.95.
It's not far off from how much is a coffee at Starbucks now? Five something?
I guess it's safe to say we're not exactly regular Starbucks patrons. There's a scene where Kathleen and Bertie, one of her other coworkers who also knew her mom, Bertie is older, they're eating at a deli, just like a little New York deli, and I always wish I always want to sit and eat at that deli and enjoy lunch with them. But have I mentioned this is my comfort move? But
It's
they're
adorable.
discussing, I know. They're discussing Fox Books moving in, and Kathleen is trying to convince herself that they can still keep their little shop afloat, even with a big discount store coming. I think Kathleen goes home and is talking to Frank about this whole issue with Fox Books moving in, and Frank is a reporter for a local paper, and he starts suggesting writing something about her store, something that can help her out, and he starts talking about how people will rally around her store and defeat the evil Fox Books. And this is something I can't help thinking about every time I watch this. Can anyone ever really defeat big business? Could a small bookstore like the shop around the corner ever really survive some massive thing like Fox Books moving in? Um, for a comfort movie, there are these little asides that kind of make me sad.
Hmm.
As someone who loves shopping locally when I can and loves an indie
Yeah.
bookstore, um,
Well, maybe not 1997, but I think in our day and age, there's a lot of small coffee shops and bookstores that are right across the street from bigger coffee shops and bookstores, and they do at least fine enough to stay open. I think more
mhm,
people, everyone's got a preference, so
mhm,
some people don't like the crowded, because independent bookstores are small. They're tiny typically. They less square footage to pay for rent. Um,
Mhm.
so they're tiny, they're cramped, they're musty. There's no big name coffee shop inside to buy a beverage. Some
Right.
places I've been into, like, you can't sit down and read either because there's no room. Some people
Well,
like
right, yeah.
the big stores. Everyone has a preference. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think the scene with the Frank loves his typewriter, isn't this like he's sitting at the head of the table and she's complaining to him about this, and he has the idea, like he said, to write the story about it. But I just felt it was Frank having an excuse to promote Frank. And I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
several times he like talks over her and like tells her to. I don't think he tells her to shut up exactly, but he kind of hushes her a lot. And it's like, oh no, you're gonna do
Mhm.
this, and you're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this. So
Mhm.
then the you
Mhm.
changes to we are. The we are changes to I am.
I see.
Uh,
Um, yeah, I do. My first thought was maybe Frank just wanted an excuse to use his typewriter again because it is a running joke in the movie that Frank is very, or he seems to be very anti-technology, really loves using a typewriter instead of
mhm.
maybe a computer.
Well, there's like levels to this first big business thing, right? We have the Starbucks or coffee shop. We have around the corner versus Fox Books. We have AOL laptops versus old school typewriter.
There you go. Look how much you're getting out of this.
Peeling the onions back.
Yeah. There's a point after this where Kathleen says she lives a small life. And I take this as she's kind of reflecting on the store really being her life. And her coworkers are also friends of hers, particularly Birdie, who I think worked there with her mother. And Birdie is still kind of their accountant, it seems. The only issue I take with this is that she has this gorgeous apartment in New York in a neighborhood that we know is very expensive, in a city that we know is very expensive. And she probably does have a very small life compared to someone like Joe Fox, whose family is obviously incredibly rich and they own boats and have very nice, you know, penthouse apartments. But maybe you could argue Kathleen lives a quieter life. And you could
Yeah.
argue that she is not sure what that life would revolve around if the store had to close. Um,
Well, the store must be doing good enough for her to live in that very big apartment on the
I
Upper West Side of Manhattan, which probably costs like half of my block of
know.
mortgages
Right?
here. So yeah, I guess if I was her in that apartment and that's how I'm making my income, I would be afraid if my little shop around the corner were closed down because
Mhm.
she would
Yeah, how are you
have.
gonna pay your rent?
Yeah, exactly. But
Exactly.
good for that shop. It's keeping her in that nice apartment.
Mhm. So we meet Joe's sibling and his aunt, who are both little kids, because his dad has been married a few times and had children with various wives. So there's a big age difference. But we also meet the nanny, who personally has always creeped me out. She gives a line about being single and she says, "Never marry a man who lies." And she says it so strangely and then gives a very strange laugh. And I always get it's a very brief introduction to this character. We never see her again, but the nanny creeps me out a little bit. And we will circle back to the nanny later. Yeah, I
It's
guess we should
weird.
clarify his grandfather also has had
Yeah.
multiple wives and multiple children with these wives, which is
Yeah.
why he has a young aunt.
That scene, I don't know if anyone else has seen The Stupids with Tom Arnold back in the day.
I
It was
feel
just a
like I
silly,
had what
yeah,
like back way, way back.
yeah. It was a silly movie. Probably watched it more than I should have. But this scene reminds me of the musical number "I'm My Own Grandpa."
Yeah.
it's, it's just like it's just silly. Like, okay, this is my aunt because my grandfather sired another
Mhm.
child way past like five wives or whatever the case may be.
I assume they're trying to paint a picture And I kind of feel like this is another way they're trying to separate Joe from the rest of his family, as showing Joe as somehow a better type of person because he's not doing this type of thing. Um, and
Yeah.
maybe setting him up also as the type of person that we would want someone like Kathleen to be with. Because I think you could argue there are a lot of reasons why, like, you wouldn't want these two to get together, or you maybe think Joe would not be good for Kathleen.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a way of trying to kind of save his character despite some of the bad things that are coming.
And it's also they use the kids to get into the bookstore
Oh, there you go.
to
Yes,
meet
that's
him, but
also
like that could have been
yes.
his niece and nephew.
Well,
like,
yeah, that's true.
like it's just such a weird dynamic that but
But on that note, we see Joe take them to a carnival in the neighborhood, and they end up in Kathleen's bookshop. I think he realizes where they are. The kids just want to go because it's a children's bookshop. But I love their first meeting. I think their banter is so fun. This is something I've learned actually, I think, working on this podcast. I'm apparently a big banter person.
which is
uh,
something we got to get better at.
right? Yeah.
How ironic.
um, mhm. I personally think that's really what makes this movie. I don't know if it would hold up the same if it wasn't these actors specifically.
Yeah, I mean they're a classic duo.
Hmm. And for anyone who doesn't know, we've already seen them in Sleepless in Seattle, which I guess it's a rom-com. Feel like more rom, not as much com. But also Joe versus the Volcano, which I have personally not seen. But so they've done at least 3 movies together. I do always think about when Kathleen is ringing up their purchase and Joe very obviously is shocked at the price. I feel like there's so many little things like this in the movie that are, I guess to me, kind of highlight the difficulty between like shopping small, buying local, and maybe what a regular person could conceivably afford at like a big box store, like the kind of thing Joe runs. Um, Again, probably too deep for this rom-com discussion. We get this really brief scene where an author stops by the shop around the corner. Um, this always makes me feel so bad because this author, Miranda, is very concerned about the store potentially closing, and they lie to her and say that their numbers are still good. And they get a promise from her that she will promote her new book at their store. We see later in the movie that she does a promotion with Fox Bookstores, and just the betrayal, Miranda.
Right, yeah.
But also another person, Miranda is another person making note of Frank being obsessed with his typewriter. She also calls him the nut from The Observer, which is his paper. And again, another kind of beat of Kathleen sort of wondering if she wants to be with this person.
Yeah, we're kind of piling on Frank slowly but surely here.
Hmm.
Because it's one thing where she notices it, but if her coworkers make fun of him or this random author makes fun of him, and it's not just her. Like, oh yeah, other people
Hmm.
realize it, and they're not around him as much as I am.
They don't even know him. They just read the paper and somehow know he's obsessed with typewriters.
Yeah, which is weird.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, so Joe and Kathleen end up at a party together. I've seen this movie so many times. I still don't understand the point of this party. I assume it's some sort of book thing because there seem to be a lot of people from like bookstores or the book world. Kathleen is excited to see Joe again, says hi, just thinks he's the nice man from the bookstore. Someone points out to her that she was speaking to Joe Fox. So now Kathleen realizes who he really is. And we get this scene where she confronts him while they're both going to the buffet table. And I feel for her so much in this scene because I feel like this would be me awkwardly confronting this man, stumbling over my words, attempting to get a full sentence out, and also like weirdly holding a knife at him. under the guise of like serving myself food, but forgetting, not being able to do an action while also trying to take down this man verbally. Joe starts quoting The Godfather at her, and we established too that her pen pal also quotes The Godfather a lot. I have never met a man in real life that quotes The Godfather so much. Like, and
I
this is
can't
very
say.
much a thing in this movie.
Yeah. I feel like I thought that was weird too, and I feel like maybe someone was saying something like wanted to appreciate The Godfather, obviously, because they could have picked any movie, but
Mhm,
also it's one of those things. They paint Kathleen in this like very innocent, almost naive kind of light, because so Joe knows who she is when the kids go to the store. He doesn't say who he is because why should he? He doesn't have to. I don't think he needs to. They're there. They're supporting her. They're buying books. He doesn't want to let her know he's the big bad guy moving across the street. I get that.
mhm,
So then she's at this book party or whatever it was, and now she's mad that he lied to her, but he didn't lie to her. He just didn't say who he really was.
mhm.
And yeah, it's kind of borderline a lie, but at the same time, like he was just a customer. Is every customer coming into your bookstore telling you who exactly they are, what they do for a living?
I think she assumes he came into her bookstore to spy on her, to
Yeah,
check out her business and whatnot. He was pulled in there by the kids, but
yeah.
she doesn't realize
Reluctantly,
that.
he was
Yeah,
reluctant too. He was
yes, he was very reluctant.
well. I mean, there's some
Um,
things about him that are like annoying and questionable, especially later on. But once she finds out who he is, she automatically hates him, and he did nothing
yes.
but support her business, literally. The point I'm getting to though with The Godfather was I think it was some sort of tie-in because her pen pal loves The Godfather, and to your point, who constantly talks about The Godfather, quotes it constantly. Now this guy does, who you already didn't know who he was when you first met him. There's a through line here of Kathleen just being oblivious to these people and not making these connections. He's giving her all the clues through the whole movie.
No one else quotes The Godfather. It's only Joe Fox.
I mean, name somebody else. I dare you. I'll wait.
Ah. There is one line in this scene that I think about all the time while they're fighting. There's some dish, I don't know what it is, but there's a ring of caviar around whatever the dish is. And Joe just starts scraping the caviar up with his spoon. And in the middle of berating him, Kathleen says, "What are you doing? That caviar is a garnish." And anytime I've ever been at a function that for some reason included caviar, not that I've been to many fancy parties like this, but anytime I see caviar or hear someone bring it up for whatever reason, I always think of that caviar is a garnish. Of all the lines in this movie, like that one is the one that has stuck with me.
That's a pretty good line. Well, I like that. Like she's berating him and frustrating him. He's just kind of not paying attention what he's doing. He wanted a little caviar, I would assume, and just keeps creating more. And then she says that he just goes to town, just scrapes like all
Yep.
of it off, and just takes a big bite.
Yeah, just to get at
Yeah,
her, yeah. Um, but yeah, like this is another example of I love their banter. I love the way they bounce things off of each other. I also think it's so funny when their significant others finally arrive and Kathleen is oh, I'm sorry, no, Frank says to something to Joe like, "How do you sleep at night?" And Patricia pops in and starts talking about what she takes for a sleeping pill. I really like that these are two side characters that they actually spent a lot of time on and they're like genuinely funny.
yeah. They're not just they're the boyfriend slash girlfriend theory, but they have a little bit more meat on their
Mhm.
bones.
Exactly. They're not just there to be an obstacle. They have their own personalities and their own quirks.
Hmm.
But then also the two of them start talking, Patricia and Frank, and they're obviously kind of hitting it off. And I love the look that Kathleen and Joe give to each other, just kind of like, what? The fact that number one, their significant others are engaged in this conversation, but then also it kind of interrupted their fight.
Yeah.
Like, it's just been totally taken over by, I think Patricia was fawning over him being an expert on the Rosenbergs, if I remember correctly. We cut to this brief scene of the Kathleen and Joe writing emails to each other as, the secret pen pals, and Joe says something like, I think it's Joe that brings it up, right? That says, "Do you think we should meet?" And Kathleen just freaks out and shuts the computer, I think.
That sounds right. God, I feel like I watched this a
Yeah.
million years ago.
I know. I feel like I watched this a really long time ago. But so yes, Joe suggests that they should meet. I feel like Kathleen reluctantly agrees.
Yeah, isn't she? Does she take this idea back to the shop and kind of shop it around with the crew? And they're like, "Oh yeah, go for it." Or am I making that up?
Mhm. But either way, we know that after this fight, that Joe is the pen pal who suggests that they meet up. We have a quick scene in the grocery store, I guess, just to highlight how much Joe is getting under Kathleen's skin. But I get so much secondhand embarrassment about this scene. Like, Kathleen ends up in a very crowded grocery store line because it's leading up to Thanksgiving and it's the cash only line. She doesn't have cash and she doesn't realize it until she's already been wrung out. And Joe swoops in and saves the day. But I hate this scene because I feel so bad for her.
I can't. This is like the one scene I could totally relate to, being someone who works in grocery retail on the holidays. It's goddamn
Mhm.
horrible, and people are horrible, and I hate people. At least for the holidays, you get like the once a year shoppers who forget manners or how a grocery store works.
Mhm.
So besides that, the other thing I thought of was I get that they clearly live in the same neighborhood in one of the biggest cities in the world, but they also live in one of the biggest cities in the world. And they keep running into each other. Like, do they live in the same building? Are they neighbors?
They are meant to be together. That's why they keep running into each other.
I get it. I get it. But it's my brain was just like, come on, man. Like it's like every day they're running into each other.
But that's how you
But that's
know.
how you know.
That's how you really know. um, I do really enjoy the juxtaposition of their two Thanksgivings. Kathleen's is very like warm and they're being very loud and singing off key. And then Joe's family is sitting very stiffly, forced to watch the little girl do a piano recital. And although I have to say, when I was taking the notes, I had to go back and check that this was Thanksgiving and not Christmas because I felt like Kathleen's group was singing carols or something. And I've never personally never seen anyone celebrate Thanksgiving this way, but that's fine. They had to do something to make Joe's family seem like bad and stuffy and boring.
Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
we see Christmas stuff at your local big box store pretty much after or even before Halloween. So
Yeah,
some
it's
people
true.
like to celebrate Christmas all year, which is fine.
Yeah, and I guess we don't really have many Thanksgiving movies in the first place. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime, we'll just take a little scene of
Yeah,
something.
a little slice of pumpkin
Call
pie.
it a yeah. Call it a Thanksgiving movie. But this is followed by Kathleen writing a letter to her pen pal about decorating for Christmas and how much it makes her miss her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think of the line where she says, "She's missing my mother so much I can't breathe." And that's something that I've actually incorporated into how I talk about things sometimes. And I realized watching this again that like that's where I got that from.
Nice.
Um, so I don't know if that's I feel weird about it now. But I'll say that sometimes when I talk about, family members that have passed, I'll just sometimes think to myself, like, gosh, I miss them so much. I feel like I can't breathe. And then it's like, oh, did I take that from You've Got Mail?
Yeah, I have a grandmother that I was really close to that I will bring up a lot in this podcast. I realized she was the movie goer grandmother. There's certain movie specials or musics like albums or whatever that will hit me randomly, and yeah, it's not fun, but it is what it is. You move on.
Mhm. Kathleen decides she's gonna go all out, fight for her store. Um, you see her giving a interview to like a local news reporter. Joe is in the gym with his friend who is Dave Chappelle, and his name escapes me in this movie. But he says that Kathleen's a pill. She's beautiful, but she's a pill. And I just thought that was such a strange, old fashioned insult. I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of struck me weird that someone in the '90s would say that.
She says something about Joe Fox comparing his store to like a Costco and his books to olive oil. And then they have this little clip of him on the news report where he's just saying something like, I sell cheap books, so sue me. And everyone's really upset about this. Like it's such a apparently horrible representation of the store. By the way, Dave Chappelle's character name is Kevin.
No, it's Dave Chappelle. They're gonna
Yeah.
recredit him as Dave Chappelle.
Right. Kevin doesn't sound right anyway for him. We see Frank going on some sort of talk show where he is very obviously flirting with the host,
Mm.
and just more evidence that it's okay for Kathleen to kind of cheat on him. Got to have those faults in the partners.
Yeah. Oh, he's like just very into himself more than anything, it seems like. And the reporter showing, or the
Hmm.
interviewer, I should say, showing a little bit of interest in him. They start flirting back and forth. But I think he was more hot for himself rewatching it with Kathleen.
Hmm.
He's like, no, no, shut up. Like he shushes her so much in this movie. It's annoying. And then he's just like
Yes.
enamored with his own interview and not realizing that that interview was starting to go sideways very inappropriately on national TV in front of his girlfriend slash roommate.
Girlfriend slash
Oh, they live
roommate.
together. I mean,
Actually,
do
do
they?
they
Do
though?
they though? They're always in someone's house together. I assume they live together.
I guess probably
Frank seems
because,
like a leech. He seems like he would live with her.
yeah, it's definitely her house, or well, her apartment, whatever, her brownstone, because her mom left it to her, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. But no, that's actually such a good point about Frank. I don't often think of himself as being full of himself just because he's not cruel about it. Like he's not
Mm.
um it's like he obviously still cares about Kathleen. He obviously wants to help her, but you're right that if nothing else, he's just like very into himself,
Yeah.
but in a way that is maybe a little more hidden beneath some qualities that actually are like okay.
There are some people that like typing on typewriters and they like the idea of having to type with thought and purpose because it's harder to correct. But the way he talks about it and does it is, lack of a better term, chip on the shoulder, hipster. Technology is evil. I'm better than technology. I don't know if he just loves himself or just thinks of himself as better than other people or both. But that's the vibe I got with
I
Frank.
think my feeling is that he thinks of himself as an intellectual
Mm.
for
Mm-hmm.
sure, and I can see how looking down on maybe like modern tech and stuff would roll into that. But it's also funny because the way you described him, it's like Frank was a hipster
Mm-hmm.
before that big movement of like hipsters.
Yeah.
He just didn't have a man bun.
Just didn't have the man bun.
Yeah. Can't believe I never realized that before.
Welcome.
But yeah, look at
Weird point of view.
you're shining new light on this whole movie for me. Joe and Kathleen, as pen pals, decide to meet, and they're going to meet at a particular restaurant. Kathleen's going to have a rose and I think Pride and
Of
Prejudice
course.
so that he knows who she is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Joe takes Dave Chappelle with him for some reason.
I think maybe
I
Joe
don't
was
know.
nervous. I can't. It just seemed like.
I assume it's from nerves. I mean, I'd be a little nervous because it could be literally anyone. Um,
Meanwhile, like
also,
the 85-pound Meg Ryan goes by herself.
yeah, I did think about that, but I don't
It's a
know.
public place, but
She's already in the public place, yeah. But I did think about that Joe needed a friend with him, and then Meg Ryan being the woman and also a small woman, like,
yeah,
is just like, no, I'm good.
yeah, good for
Um,
her.
yeah, I guess. I don't know. I would have been nervous. But
Same.
yeah. But Joe obviously is freaking out. He makes Dave Chappelle look through the window to see if she's at least pretty, at least seems like a normal person. But I love the way that Dave Chappelle delivers this whole scene. Um, the back and forth between him slowly revealing that kind of looks like Kathleen Kelly, kind of looks like sort of, and just the way he finally reveals it to Joe. And I think Joe's complete disbelief, but then immediately deciding he's just going to leave her there. And I'm glad that Dave Chappelle gives him crap for it because, like, it's so mean. I understand kind of he probably thinks like, well, this is obviously going to go nowhere then because of who it is, but it's also just so cruel. And I don't know if, to me, it's more cruel that he then eventually goes in there and mocks her.
Uh, well, first, yes, Dave Chappelle, aka Kevin, in this film, as you pointed out. Um, I thought the scene was great with him in it,
Mhm,
both on trying to describe Kathleen and break the ice,
mhm,
but then also
mhm,
like giving him shit.
mhm.
I definitely think I don't know. I thought I was pretty mad when he was going to leave. I'm like, that's like you don't want to be stood up,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think he thought it was going to go south because of who she was. I think he thought and knew it was going to go south because of who he was and how she looks at him.
Well, right.
Um,
Yeah.
he ends up going in there anyway, and I actually really love this scene because I love the tension. And
Mhm,
it's funny because maybe it's my first view, and I'm older than I would have been when this came out if I watched it when it came out. But I kind of
mhm,
actually my gauge goes from like when he goes to leave and Kevin convinced him like, "Oh, Joe, don't be shitty," because the whole time like I get he's the big bad with the big bookstore, but I'm like he just seems
mhm,
kind of normal. He's as you said earlier, he's not like his family or it doesn't seem like
mhm,
it. And he's just inheriting this business and he obviously doesn't want to have it fail. But as the scene goes on and he's like sitting at the table and it's kind of rude of him, but he's supposed to be there, but only he knows he's supposed to be there. And I'm watching it going, okay, we already name dropped the Godfather quote. She didn't realize that. He comes and sits at a table. Granted, as I said about 5 minutes ago, they keep running into each other all over this damn city. So she's just used to seeing
mhm,
him everywhere. Like it's no surprise
mhm.
she's sitting by herself and the only open chair is the one he's supposed to be in. So she didn't catch that
Yeah.
either. And he definitely gives a performance. And I don't mean Tom Hanks. I mean Joe Fox, the character. Like he has something to tell her, and he's trying to ease into that. At least from my point of view, and she just gets cranky because she doesn't like him, and to her, he's interrupting a potential date. So, and obviously, she doesn't know that. So it's a little cruel. He's keeping it from her. But I always felt, always the one time I watched it, as I'm watching the scene, it felt like he was working himself up to tell her and then as she's slowly like standing up for herself, which she does, and I applaud her for that, and starts chipping away her niceness to a little more callous side of her, he kind of
Mhm.
becomes on the defensive, and that's when he becomes a little more mocking and teasing because I feel like he's hurt because she just, the guy I'm going to meet is so nice and blah blah blah, nothing like you, and he's like,
Yeah.
bitch, it is me. I am the one who knocks. Like and so he turns on that business, not charm, the opposite of charm, and he just becomes kind of a dick. And then I do feel bad, but at the same time, he kind of got hurt a little bit too.
Yeah, I definitely think that he ended up hurt as well by her attempting to defend herself
Mhm.
and just get him to leave. But am I understanding this right, that you think he went in there with the intention to tell her?
I don't think he had that intention at first because again he was trying
Okay.
to flee. But he said, I mean, why else is he going to go in there besides Kevin saying, you can't let her just flounder? Because I
Uh-huh.
think he didn't have a game plan, and then he goes in, and then he decides to sit down, and he even brings up the book again. Another red flag. That's something that is between her and her pen pal.
Yeah,
Um,
with, like, the language that she enjoys with the
Yeah,
book.
and he's like, "Well, I have read it. Like, little do you know, blah blah blah." And she gets him to read it, the pen pal that is, and again, Godfather, Pride and Prejudice. Like he might be thinking about it and debating it still as he's talking to her, but I got the feeling that he's dropping hits. Definitely, like he wants her to get it. I think. I don't think he wants to tell her. I think
Mm,
he
mhm,
wants to at least leave her alone for her date that she's not going to obviously have because it is he, but maybe drop these nuggets so she goes back
mhm.
to think about it, but she never makes these connections. Also, before we move on, I do have a cool note I have here. Joe is lit like the Godfather. When he's sitting there at the table, everything's like romantically tungsten orange light, and he's just lit from
Mhm,
underneath. And you see it more towards the end when he starts to become more on the defensive and becomes mean because underlighting is not
mhm.
very nice looking, and he looks like a
Right.
bad guy now because he's
Yeah.
being mean.
Yeah. I didn't even catch that, so good on you. Yeah, I did have some thoughts watching it back this time that maybe he decides to go in and gauge or attempt to gauge how receptive she would be to it being him, and obviously it all goes south. Because, yeah, I can't imagine he goes in there simply to mess with her. I don't think he's, like, quite that cruel.
No, I think using the
Um,
word gauge, I think that's the perfect word I couldn't think of. Yeah, I think he's like testing the
okay.
water.
Yeah. I did wanna point out, though, the movie that this is based off of, The Shop Around the Corner, this is a similar scene as to how those pen pals find out about each other. The man, Jimmy Stewart, finds out first that the pen pal is his, like, work nemesis. And so there are enough similarities that it's definitely an homage to their original material. I do really like the next scene where Kathleen is talking to the bookstore staff about him not showing up, wondering why he didn't show up, and then they think he could be the rooftop killer. Um,
So random.
I know. And I feel so bad for her in general because she was stood up, and then for them to be like, "Oh my god, I know why."
Right,
Like he's the
yes.
rooftop killer.
Yeah. I also like
Um,
that she goes home and checks her email right away because of all the things they mentioned that could have happened,
mhm.
being the rooftop killer, a car accident, all the stuff, like he would have time to write an email like, "Sorry, I didn't make it. I was in a car accident." Again, this is pre
Yeah.
2000, so it's not like he just texts her, "I'm going to not make it today." Um,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
it's the again, technology is a little bit of a under theme here and how addictive it
Yeah.
is.
Kathleen does say in her next email to the pen pal that there is no excuse for her behavior when she confronted Joe in the cafe. I think she says something about finally getting some digs in. Um, I don't know if I agree with that there's no excuse for her behavior, like, because even before the restaurant scene, like, it's not like he's been super nice to her either when they've run into each other in person, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately I'm in like two camps here because I
Okay.
feel, well, as far as moving the movie along, of course she's going to say that because who's going to read it? Joe, who obviously felt like
Mhm,
he
mhm.
got some knife turns in his back, so he's
Yeah.
now okay. She's apologizing to Joe Fox without knowing she's apologizing to Joe Fox, so I get that.
Mhm.
But also, you know, is it true that she should? There was no excuse for behavior. to her, yes, like she wants to be the bigger person, or at least
Mm,
that's what the email makes it seem. So if that's how you are normally on your day to day, you want to turn the other cheek, so to speak, then yeah, for her point of view, I can see why she would say that. I think she had every right to stand up for herself, but sometimes that's not
mhm.
always the best way to go about things.
I guess I was reading it differently too because I think you have a point that she felt she should be the bigger person. When I hear her say that, I think of it as she should just be nice for nice sake. Like I took it as,
Ah, I see what you're saying.
you know, she should always be polite. She should always be, you know, kind or accommodating regardless of who it is. And in my head, I was like, but no, this man is literally like ruining your livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you also brought up the fact that we have to smooth the path for her and Joe to eventually get together. So something has to happen for them to be able to get over that meeting.
Especially if
That
only one of
mhm.
them knows.
Now he knows she feels bad about what she said
Yeah,
about him. Yeah. I really like when Kathleen talks to Birdie about deciding to close the store. Birdie reveals that she's secretly rich because she bought Intel stock, I think. I just really like this when there's some random older character or a character that you think is maybe not so smart or savvy, and then they're just like, oh no, I'm sad because I did this one thing
yeah,
and you would have never guessed. Yeah. We reach this part in the movie where we see both Joe and Kathleen's relationships falling apart because we got to get the significant others out of the
of
way, right?
course.
So, right. Uh, it seems like Joe is really struggling with the fact that he put Kathleen out of business, probably because he likes her a little bit now. And you can see Patricia running around commenting that, um, kind of making comments about how like cutthroat he is and how, like he cut Kathleen down without looking back or something like that. And I think we saw a little bit in the beginning that Joe is maybe not as cutthroat as the rest of his family. I still feel like he was putting on a little bit of an act that early scene where he's in the office with his dad and his grandfather. Um, but obviously, he also just feels bad now because he has gotten to know Kathleen and he likes her.
Yeah, I definitely think he is not who his family is. He doesn't have all these different relationships and different children with different women who are way younger than him and so on. And he kind of has to put on, when he puts on his business suit, he's almost like he's putting on almost like a mask of, he's
Mm-hmm.
still nicer than everyone else, but he has to have
Mm-hmm.
this perception of like business. Like I have to be business, and I don't think with my heart. I
Mm-hmm.
think with my brain and with my wallet. And then his
Yeah.
pen pal, the internet, is the way he can talk to someone and be anonymous. I think is how he gets to open up.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So I think we see Joe already a little affected by the way Patricia's talking about Kathleen going out of business. They end up getting on an elevator together in their building, and the elevator gets stuck. Everyone is kind of going around just saying nice things about, their family. And if I ever get out of this elevator, I want to like hug my family again or something, or I'm going to marry my girlfriend, things like that. And Patricia is just like yelling and being very shrill about being stuck in the elevator and not finding her Tic Tacs in her purse. And you can tell this is the moment that Joe realizes that she's just kind of not that nice.
Right. Yeah, because she's just in a
Like,
somewhat tense situation. She's just losing her shit.
right, exactly. Um, and on Kathleen's side of things, uh, she and Frank go to a movie where for some reason Kathleen feels the need to confess to him she didn't vote in the last election.
Such a weird
Um,
time to admit to that.
yeah, I assume she knows things are not going well and that she's maybe not the kind of person that Frank would want, or that she assumes she's not the kind of person Frank would want based on his recent interactions with other women. And I think she brings that up kind of as a test, maybe. He ends up following her out of the theater and they basically break up in a very friendly way where he admits he's like really into that reporter he was flirting
Mm-hmm.
with, or talk show
But
host,
yeah,
whatever she was.
I want to point out how you worded that because I think that's how the movie gives this perception. She thinks she is not what Frank wants in a woman, which is
Hmm.
definitely kind of it's viewed for through her eyes. So of course there's like self doubt and stuff like that. Why can't it be like, no, I don't want this typewriting loving, flirtatious. It just does seem that she's like, oh well, this is what you like in girls, and it's not me, so we should break up. But I wanted to be like, no, I want someone more like my pen pal, which is clearly like in the back of her head.
Hmm.
That's not what she's
Right.
portraying and like verbalizing.
Hmm. Yeah, she isn't like breaking up with Frank openly saying I deserve someone nicer, I deserve someone who I click with
Mm-hmm.
better. It's very much, I feel, her gauging whether Frank sees her as his equal, but then I think because she realizes he kind of doesn't, she she's getting out of the relationship in a more roundabout way and is okay with it because she can go pursue the pen pal
Yeah,
route.
I guess it's one of those old. It's not you, it's me, but in a way where it's
Hmm.
like she breaks it down to Frank, I guess in a nice way, because if she's like, oh, you're looking for something different than
Hmm.
me, but I'm going to break up with
Hmm.
you because of that for you, I guess it makes it easier on
Hmm.
Frank, which I guess would make it easier on Kathleen.
Yeah, and I assume that's why she kind of doesn't care that he's like really into
Right.
that um, TV host, because like they're literally laughing about it. Oh wait, but does she admit to him that she has that pen pal?
I want to say yes, but my memory is.
I can't remember
I
now.
remember them just making fun of the fact that, oh, yeah, I was kind of laying it on thick. Um,
Yeah, he was like, I can't help
yeah.
myself. I remember that.
Someone loves
Um,
me more than I love myself. Look at this.
but Jillian running off with the nanny. We see Joe going to stay on his dad's boat or one of his
One
boats. I
of,
don't
yeah.
know. And his dad is now single as well because his wife Jillian ran off with the nanny with the awkward laugh. And I don't know, that nanny made me so uncomfortable that like this just makes it like worse. Like I don't know that she like broke up their marriage. I don't know. Not that these people were serious about each other anyway,
Right.
but so everyone's single. It's cool. But there is a point where Joe's dad is telling him, uh, I don't remember how he gets to it, but something about you have to be with whoever fills your heart with joy. And very obviously, we realize that for Joe Fox, that person is Kathleen Kelly, despite all the horrible things he said about her to Dave
It was,
Chappelle.
yeah, right. I think it was Joe's dad going over the multitude of relationships he'd had, most of them with
Mm,
Joe's nannies and
nannies.
babysitters, and it's really
Hmm.
kind of cringe. But uh, there was
Hmm.
the one that he had a softness in his heart for, and he of course messed that up by going after somebody younger years later, probably. I'm assuming.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
Joe, who again kind of wants to separate himself from the rest of the foxes, kind of is like, yeah, I don't
Hmm.
want to have this list of divorcees. And children multitude of generations later.
Yeah.
So yeah, I might not find another pen pal like Kathleen that I could make into maybe more of a romantic
Hmm.
relationship.
Hmm.
So I think it was more of his dad's failures, if anything, that kind of made him realize, strike now or don't strike at all.
Yeah. So we launch into like the last sequence of the movie, which is Joe attempting to woo Kathleen. Um, I guess he is first attempting to see if they could even be friends, if she would even be willing to talk to him or spend time with him. However, he does this by basically barging into her apartment while she's sick, which is, I feel like, is the
The worst.
worst. Like I think maybe this was supposed to be cute because he brings her flowers while she's sick, but he rings her doorbell. She obviously does not want visitors. He manages to get into her building because someone else is exiting. And then Kathleen's like frantic, trying to like cover up her pajamas and pick up her apartment a little bit. And then not only, does she obviously not want visitors, she obviously thinks she's like sick and looking gross. At some point, she goes into her bed to lay down and he just sits on her bed. She does not know this man well, and she only knows him as like
Yeah,
an antagonist, and she doesn't know him as like a nice guy, and he's sitting on her bed with his shoes on, and I can't handle it. Like, it's so intimate that he sits on her
yeah.
bed,
I don't like any of this.
and to her he is still just a business
Mm-hmm.
rival who honestly like kind of ruined her
But he
life.
bought her flowers.
Like, but yet now he's in her apartment, yes, with flowers, but also not taking no for an
Yeah.
answer in any way, shape, or
No,
form,
no,
sir.
no. And
Um,
while on the bed, she's saying how she's not feeling good or whatever, and he does the Frank Hush thing, and I get so mad. Like, no, do not be Frank. Why is this woman being hushed so much?
it's a really excellent
I
point.
really didn't like any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of at that point I'm like, well, maybe they don't get together, and I'm fine with it at this point. She just needs to be an independent. Well, I was gonna say book.
Be alone and find yourself,
Yeah, I was
Kathleen.
gonna say an independent woman in an independent bookstore, but half that's gone already. So, my bad, Kathleen.
Oh man. Somehow he recovers from this scene that we find pretty awkward. I don't know, man. um the Joe as the pen pal gets back into saying that they should meet, but that he has a project that needs tweaking. So their friendship is the project, or just the scene if Kathleen can even stand to spend time with him is the project. The slow.
Yeah, maybe his. If we go back to my example, that business suit, figuratively, that he wears, maybe he needs to realize how to adjust his perception, or how he is
Hmm.
perceived, I should say, to other people. Most importantly, Kathleen. Maybe he
Yeah.
is the project
I feel like he's testing the waters. He's trying to build a rapport with her because it's not even like he has to get to know her. He has to change her whole perception of
of Joe
him.
Fox, the person, not the pen pal.
Mhm. But yeah, we see them meeting up, doing little things together, like shopping at an outdoor market. Kathleen makes a comment at some point that she wrote a book, and it sounds like maybe she's kind of shopping it around, looking for a publisher or something. And she says, I would have never written a book if you hadn't put me out of
Yeah.
business. And maybe that is true, but I just don't, it rubs me the wrong way that like this we're trying to find the silver lining to her ruining her life.
Well, yeah.
Like, this was her mom's store that obviously meant so much to her. Her mom is gone. Like, she's like, "Oh, but I would have never written this book if you hadn't run it to the
Well, a
ground."
couple things.
So, it's okay.
One, this montage of them becoming friends. How does it spark? We just said it's a very uncomfortable scene where he comes in her, her apartment, sits on her bed, and she's sick. And then like you said, they're shopping together. He's like buying her lunch because he put her out of business. But it's
That's a
like,
good point.
how did that start though? There being two,
I think there was a little scene of her being in a coffee shop and he ran into her.
of
Like she was
course,
sitting at a window in the coffee shop and he like knocked on the window. But also, has he been like tracking her
probably.
movements? Like, did he know she was in that coffee? Like, he had to have, right? Because he couldn't have just left this to
That's
chance,
how it was the first half of the movie.
or else it wouldn't. Well, so Kathleen sets a day and time to meet with her pen pal. But earlier that same day, she meets Joe for lunch and he's walking her home and he finally confesses his feelings for her. But he says something like, "Wouldn't you love to do this and that together for as long as we both shall live?" And I was like, wow, sir, coming on strong. Because you haven't even dated and you're just like, "Oh, by the way, I want to like be with you for the rest of my life."
Right.
Like, what if you took it one step at a time and just went on a
Yeah.
date? Like, but rom-com. So she obviously is taken aback and confused and also like I think still, really wants to meet the pen
Hmm.
pal. You see her kind of, I don't know how she ends that situation with him, but she's just kind of like no.
Right. And she goes back up.
And she's like, "I have to
Yeah,
go."
she has to go get ready for this meet and greet, which he
Hmm.
obviously knows about. So again, there's that weird feeling where he's like hanging something over her, but she isn't even aware of it, which
Hmm.
is also
Hmm.
kind of annoying.
Yes, I
Like I
agree.
found myself rooting
um
for and against him the whole movie. Like, yeah, you're not that bad. Oh, you're kind of being stupid right now.
yeah, yeah, that's my thing with this movie is like I love it. I love Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan together, but if I think about it too much, it doesn't work as nicely.
Yeah.
But the final scene in the movie, we see Kathleen going to the park where she's going to meet the pen pal. She sees a dog running up first, and a man is yelling Brinkley after the dog, and she knows that that is the pen pal's
Yeah.
dog. And I guess Joe has just hidden his dog from her this whole time. Um, but we see him walk up after his dog. So there's no question because he sent the dog first, called him Brinkley, that this is the pen
Hmm.
pal, that Joe Fox is the person she's been talking to. And she has her slow realization. And I do really like all the emotions that play out on Meg Ryan's face in this moment. Rom-coms don't get enough credit in my opinion because like she's still like an amazing actress, like just for this little
Hmm.
bit alone, the confusion, the shock, the happiness, the kind of almost like scared and sad in a way because obviously there's this complication with it being Joe Fox, but she does say that she hoped it would be him, so obviously his little project worked.
Yeah, but then when they meet up, where'd the fuck the dog go?
Oh, he's sniffing
Oh,
around them
okay.
because they like pet him while they're
Oh,
kissing
I
or
just feel like
something. No, he's there.
okay,
Don't worry.
I was very concerned in that scene. Like, also, all the
Mhm.
emotions across her face was good, but I don't know if I saw anger, and I think I would be angry. It's like like at this point. Oh, maybe she doesn't know
Mhm.
that he knows.
She doesn't know that he knew it was her,
Okay.
but she just says, "I hoped it would be you." Like, because when he gets to the top of this hill that the dog is running up, and you see that it's him, he kind of like shrugs his shoulders, like, "Yep, it's me," as if there was this understanding that one knew and the other didn't.
Yeah, the shrug of the shoulders was it's surprise. I guess kind of like
Yeah,
he
yeah.
clearly wasn't surprised. He was like, "This is the best I got." The
Yes.
dog on the park routine, and You know, it's if they both were in the same bubble or separate bubbles, but
Mhm.
unbeknownst to each other who they were, I feel like he would have also been more surprised and a little like shrug.
Right, and I think also as viewers, it's hard because, like, we
Hmm.
know that he already had all the information. It's hard to remember that there might be a conversation
Yeah,
later where she finds out that he's known about her for what, like a year or something at this point, or maybe half a year, because we do see all the seasons change in New
yeah.
York throughout this
It's been a
movie.
minute.
Yeah. So because it's spring now, it started in the fall.
It's a rom
Mm.
com and it's a happy ending, and we're leaving it that.
Yeah, sometimes I just want a happy ending. I don't care. They're happy. She's fine with it. It's weird and complicated, but she's fine with
It's
it.
fine. Life is weird and
Mhm.
complicated.
Yep. I did like this little scene that we didn't touch on where it's after Kathleen has officially closed the store and she goes into Fox Books and she's just like crying in the children's book section and absolutely one ups the employee they have working the children's section
Hmm.
because a mom's trying to find a certain book series and Kathleen just starts rattling so many things off about the series and different authors and whatever. And I can appreciate having a vast knowledge about something very specific like that. And you just are like, I just really want to talk about children's books with someone else because I feel like that's why we started this
Yeah,
podcast. Like, I would just love to talk about movies with someone
yeah.
else who also loves movies.
In a way, in a weird way, I was kind of hoping she'd get a job there, but like that would not feel right to me. But at the same time, she obviously would be better than most of those people there. But it also shows
Right.
what you don't get at big box stores. You just get employees who work there, which is fine. I'm sure most of them are helpful. But obviously, her character, a lover of all books, would have more knowledge to help the customers better. That's the price
Hmm.
you pay for, you know, buying the expensive books from the little store. You get someone who's more personable and cares more, at
Hmm.
least, or at least appears to.
Right. Yeah. Because it's usually a passion if they're going to open this little store for
Hmm.
it. So we always like to talk about whether the movie held up, but this is a movie you've never seen before.
I
Okay.
enjoyed it. I thought it was
Hmm.
fun. Parts of it were questionable. So, and then as far as does it hold up, is like from 1999 pre Y2K to 25 years later. Some parts, no, not just the technology part, just some of the. I don't know. I felt like Kathleen was getting gaslit the whole time. That made me feel a certain way, I guess. But besides that, again, being a first watch, some of it's a little shocking in a modern world, so to speak. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it, so I think it holds up in that aspect as a good rom com, especially because it has the Ryan Hanks duo.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, the answer is always yes. Despite, like I said, if squint too hard,
Overthink.
some of it's a little, yeah, some of it's maybe a little problematic. I, you know, Kathleen really got screwed over in this movie.
Yeah,
So,
you said that everything kind of she gets screwed over, but if they do
yeah.
end up till death do that part, she might get part of the Fox Books inheritance, which is kind of ironic.
Hmm. There you go. Honorable mentions for comfort watches.
Too many. That's why it was just hard to pick.
Yeah, it really was.
A lot of the first things that popped in my head, I might have mentioned this at the beginning. I had Star Wars, like watched all of those growing up. Really liked Back to the Future and Indiana Jones, those trilogies, Lord of the Rings, Hook,
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Yeah. For me, generally, like rom-coms, musicals. Um, I was thinking about maybe The Wedding Singer, Singing in the Rain, Clueless, screwball comedies. We'd love to hear your thoughts on our movie picks as well as your own favorite comfort watch movies. You can find us on Instagram at Back Through the Lens Pod and on Facebook at Back Through the Lens. You can also email us at backthroughthelenspodcast@gmail.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. It's the best way to support our show.
If you enjoyed our show today, please give us a like and follow for updates on new and future episodes. Our show is produced by our hosts Rachel Campbell and myself, Joe Siomick, with additional help and support from Peter Tellup of LPV Productions. Rachel, Peter, and I are also the executive producers. Our awesome logo is brought to you by Tom Faraci, and our wonderful theme song is by Matt Tarek. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more trips into our movie watching past on Back Through the Lens.
All right, I'm stopping it.